Hi, I'm Paul Seal from CodeShare.co.uk. Welcome to this sixth episode in this series where I'll show you how to build a website with Umbraco 10. In the last episode, we got the navigation working. We did it in two ways. From the content of the site, just driving that navigation there, so actually pulling the pages through to the navigation. And then after that, what we did was we just added a simple multi-URL picker so that we could just add the URLs for it. And someone in the comments has asked if we can go the extra level and do it where we can have like a drop down navigation on there as well. So in this episode, what I want to do is just show you how to use nested content to create this drop down navigation level. So what we want to do is we want to go into settings and we want to create ourselves an element. So in this, I'm just going to do nested content folder. So inside the elements, I want to do a nested content one so that I can create any types that I'm using for nested content under here, under that folder. So now I'm going to create myself an element type, and this is important when you're using nested content or the block list. You need to create it as an element. And so an element type, it defines a schema for a repeating set of properties, for example, in a block list or nested content property editor. So that is the one you want to use. And I'm going to call this navigation item, and I'm going to give this an icon. I think I'm going to do target. There we go. And then I'm just going to add a content tab. So on this content tab, I'm going to add some properties. So the first property is going to be, I'm going to add a title property. Enter the title for this navigation item. If this is blank, the name of the actually there won't be a name. Yeah, if this is blank, no, we won't leave it, we won't allow it to be blank. What we'll do is we'll force it to be mandatory. So we'll do string, text string, field is mandatory, submit. So we have our title, and then we want to have a link. Now this link property can be optional because this might be like a folder instead of an actual navigation item itself. It might be one you click on and then it opens the menu underneath. So enter the link you want this item to go to, and we'll just search for URL. Now at the moment we've only got multi-URL picker, so let's create a single URL picker. So the way we're going to do it is we're going to do it through the, I'm just going to go back a second. So we're going to click on this, so create a new configuration. Click on that picker, multi-URL picker, and then I'm going to name it like this with square brackets. So this is the type that it's using as its base, and then with a name after it. So single URL picker. So the minimum number of items, 0. The maximum I want is 1. The overlay size, we can leave it as small, and then we'll just do submit. So that's created our single URL picker, and we put that limitation on it being just 1, and then we'll submit. We won't make that one mandatory. And then the final part of this one is just to add a child links or sublinks or whatever you want to call it. I'm calling mine child links. Enter the links to display under this item in the navigation menu drop down. So with this one, we want it to be the multi-URL picker. So there we go. So underneath this item in the menu, we will add our list of menu items. So then we'll click on that, and then it's not mandatory, and then we'll save there. So we've got a title, a link, and child links. Now what we need to do is create a data type, and we want to call it new data type. We want to do nested, and then we'll call it navigation item list. And then the property editor, we want to use nested content. So we search for that. The element types, so we're going to use navigation item. The select element doesn't contain any supported groups. Tabs are not supported by this editor. Either change them to groups or use the block list editor. So we'll go back out of this and we'll change those to be groups. So discard changes. So this now needs to go onto a group rather than a tab. So we need to be able to change them to groups. So I think what we can do is we can put it onto, actually I think we can create, actually let's add a group, group content, content group I'm going to call it. So this is how we move them to a group instead of a tab. Content group, and then we want to drag this from here, reorder, we want to grab this and drag it down. So we've got the title, the link and the child links. And we needed to create a different name here just for doing this. So I'm done reordering, save that. And now on this content group, if we click on reorder and we move this to the generic tab, now it's no longer on the content tab. We can say I'm done reordering this, and then we can delete the content tab. Now I think it's important that we see this, because this might happen to you when you go to create a nested content property and you don't know how to do it. So I could have just started the video again and done it properly the first time, but I think it's important that you see how I rectify it. So we'll save that, and then now that we've done that, we can just change this group name back to content. So let's go back and try and create that nested content one again. So new data type, nested, and then we'll call it navigation item list. And the property editor we want to use is nested. Choose nested content, and then we're going to choose the navigation item, and now it recognizes the group, so it's content. We'll leave the template for now, but well, no, it's fine. We can do title. They're all going to have a title property. So this is using the alias. So this is Angular, this is, and it's pulling through the alias of the title property. So that will render that in the list. So we're going to save that. Before we do, just check to see if we want to make any restrictions on it. Are there any minimum items or maximums? Do they need to confirm deletes? Do we want to show icons? So I'm happy with all of this, so I'm going to save that. So now we have this nested navigation item list. Where we had our home page on our document types, if we go back to pages and we had our home page one, we had on the navigation tab main navigation, and remember that was inherited from site navigation properties. So if we click through to that, we can get to it using the infinite editor. So we want to delete this one, and actually what I'll do is, before we go into this, I'll go into content. I'm just going to delete the content of it. Remove, oops, and then save and publish, just so we don't cause any issues. And rather than deleting main navigation, we will just change the type that it is. So we'll click through to site navigation properties, and then we'll click on settings here, and we will change. So where we had this settings for main navigation, where we had this property editor, we're going to change that one, and we're going to do, sorry, not a property editor, to a data type. So we're going to change it to the one we called nested navigation item list. And do we want it to be mandatory? I would say so, yeah, because it's main navigation for the website. So let's make that mandatory, submit that, save and close. So now we have that on there on our home page. So we can go to content, stay, we just need to save again. So it realized that, all right, I added it to that document type, but I didn't actually save any changes on here. So now let's go through to the home page, content, navigation, and now the main navigation, it wants to be built up using this nested content. So let's do that then. So we wanted home in the navigation, didn't we? We want the link to home, we can just do that, or we can click it like that and then submit. Then any child links under home? Well, no. then we can add another one. So this one can be about, and then we can have a link. So we can choose it in the tree, about. Any child links? Not on this one. We'll add one on the next one. So we'll do one for blog, and then we'll create a link to blog. And then we'll have a fictional page. We'll have some fictional page. So link, we'll just put a hash in here, testing 1. Link title, we will call it first item. Actually, just first item. And submit that. And then we'll do another one, hashtag testing 2. And we'll call this one second item. And we'll do 3. We'll do 3 items, submit. So these are going to be in the drop down for blog. Oh, actually, let's go back. Let's edit the first item and make that go to the blog, because on the blog one, it won't actually click through. The way the Bootstrap navigation menu works, the actual top level navigation item, when you have a drop down, that doesn't act as a link anymore. There are things you can do to make it work, but we're just working with this template that we downloaded, so let's not complicate things. So I'm going to delete this, remove this link for the actual blog item itself, the main drop down name. Then in here, in the second item, let's rename this and call it most popular. I don't know. And then we'll add another one of latest blog posts. I've put that in the wrong bit. Hashtag testing 3. And we'll put the title latest blog posts. So those pages don't exist on our site at the moment, but they could do. And then the final link was contact. So we'll add that on as well. So we'll do contact. And then we'll create the link to the contact page there. Submit that. So we don't want any child pages because this is going to exist. So now if we look at it, now our main navigation is made up of more complex objects. So whereas before it was made up of links like this, now we've used nested content to allow us to create more complex objects so that we can add extra properties to it and do more with it. So what we need to do, as always, is to rebuild the models, because we're using manual source code manual, so that we have to manually generate the models there. There is another way. I don't know if I've shown you on this, but you can actually, on a document type, I believe. Oh no, there used to be on different versions where you could do save and generate models. I don't know why it's not there anymore. So we've created it all. Really, now that we've done all that, what we want to do is we want to build it. So let's go into our terminal. I'm just going to say A for always to rebuild it, because I had .NET Watch run on. So it's restarting the app. That's great. So we see that this is running here as normal. If that's not worked for you, you can always do Control-C to stop it, and then and then .NET Watch run again, and then turn that. But so that's done it for us. So now in our code, we should be able to start working with it. So let's go into our views folder, partials, and main navigation here. So at the moment, we were just looping through the children, and those children were coming from the main navigation property. Now that main navigation property is more complex. It's actually a nested content property. So I'm going to call this navigation items is homepage.main navigation. And so if navigation items is not null, and navigation items.any, for each item in navigation items, this is where we can then do our checks, and we can get the link and all sorts of things like that. So what we need to do while we look at this, we just need to remember what the properties are and what we need to pull through. So the first thing is we've got our, like with the home page, so on a standard one, this is one without a drop down, this is the markup that we've got for it. So instead of item.url, the item is this. So what we want is item.link.url. So .link.url should do it. And then item.link.target is the one that we want to change that to. And item, now we've got a title, so we can change that. It's up to you. You could use either the title field, which we made mandatory anyway, or you could use the link.name. So if you wanted to, you could just do item.link.name. And we could just only use the title when it comes to the folder ones, but I'm going to keep it as item.title. Again, it's up to you how you want to do that. And next, we need to cater for the drop downs. So if we have a look at this, we need to, where we've got this LI, nav item, there's a new type of nav item, and that is one with a drop down. So really, before we do this, we just need to check if it's got any child links. So var has child links equals, we do item.child links is not null, and item.childlinks.any. So that is our Boolean value now that we're going to use. So if has child links, then we are going to render some markup, else we'll render this. And we can make this cleverer later on, but for now let's just cut that, paste that in there, and save. So in theory, this should work now, only for the ones that don't have child links. So we could reload the page and see that, well, currently we have an error, but we'll refresh the page. And we don't have the blog one because that one has child links. So that's a good start. So now we're rendering these as normal, as they were before, even though we're now using more complex objects. So the markup that we need for the drop down is similar, but we need to make some changes to it. So we can copy this, paste it in here for a start, and then let's just break it down into what it needs to be. So I've got number lock on, sorry about that. Oh, I've not got number lock on. Either way. Right, so we've got an LI with an A inside it. And because it's got child links, this href, we can put the URL in it, but it's not going to go anywhere. And that's only if it has a link. I think when we are using the drop down, we don't even need to render that link. So we're just going to do hashtag there. We're keeping the same styling as all the other ones. Oh, sorry, that, and the target we can take off as well, because we don't need that. Then we're left with, we just need to add an ID for it. So I think there is a property called ID. So ID attribute equals, and then we'll do at item, and then we can do, I think, is it key? And I think if this key, we can have a look at the code for it. If this key is a GUID, we can just strip out the, it might be fine because it's kebab case, but we're just going to look into it anyway. So this, I can't find a key. Oh well, it doesn't matter. We'll just go ahead with it anyway and just make the change anyway. So item.key. So that's the ID for this one. And then in the classes here, we just need to add a drop-down toggle. So we're saying that this is actually a drop-down toggle. And we have our ID. And then we have a role we need to add. So role equals, and we'll call that button. And then we'll do data BS toggle and equals, and then we want it to be drop down. So this is just using what we need to do, the HTML anyway, for when you do navigation, and also DataBS is to do with Bootstrap. And then we want area expanded equals false. So now we've added that to this one, then we've just got the name of it basically, and we're pulling that through already, the title. So that's like the top part, and we should be able to have a look and see if that's worked. So if we reload the page, has it pulled it through? Yeah, we've got a blog, but we've got no sub drop down yet. So then the last bit to do then is to go through all of the ones below it and put the drop down in. So because we already know that it has those child links, we can just @ for each. We don't need to @ for each because we're inside a code block, so that's fine. So we'll just do for each var child link in item.childlinks. I'll just move this up the page a bit. So then what we want to do is we want to, outside of that actually, we want the UL. So this is the unordered list, and that means we want this inside it, which because it's inside an HTML element, we need to tell it it's a code block again. So we've got our UL wrapped around it, and that needs some classes on it. So class equals drop down menu, and then border 0. So that's a utility class in Bootstrap 5, and then we want the area labeled by, and then that uses the ID of the item. So the same way we got that ID, so item.key, we should be able to put it into here. And again, if there are any issues, we can always fix it. So that's the ID, and then we're looping through the items now. So it's going to be an LI, and then an A, class equals drop down item. And then in that we want the href. Now we have our child link, so we know that we've got all those properties for it. So URL for that we want target equals @childlink.target, and then we put the name in there @childlink.name. So that should give us now the drop down underneath. What's this saying? Enter links to display. So this is saying dereference of a possible null. Well, it shouldn't be null because we've already done a has child links. So I'm not too concerned about that. Let's reload the page. So we should see the blog menu still, and then we should see the items underneath it, and we don't see the items underneath it. So we've obviously done something wrong, and my guess is that it's to do with the ID of it. So area labeled 4, so it seems to be correct. I'll just check my code to make sure that I've done everything that I needed to do. So we've got a UL with a class drop down menu, border 0, area labeled by, and that's the ID of that item. We've got an LI with a class of nav item, but we don't have drop down, so we need drop down in there. Drop down, oops, drop down. Have I done that right? Now let's try it again. Still wrong. So we'll just keep going. So we need to make sure we've got a class nav link, then those, and then drop down toggle. Href is wherever it needs to go to. Then we've got the ID, then we've got the role, then we've got data BS toggle. Now it might be that I've misunderstood what data BS toggle is and it says drop down, so that might be incorrect, but again we're going to fix it together. Then we've got our UL class drop down menu border 0, so that looks fine to me. ARIA labeled by, that looks fine. Then for each we've got our UL, we've got our LIs, we have a class drop down item, href is that, target is that, child link name, and we're closing the LI. So it looks to me like we've done everything correctly. So what I will do is I will just KC on that. So that does the comment, and I'm just going to paste in the HTML that I know was working and just see if that works for us. And it could just be something to do with this drop down, data BS toggle drop down. Yeah, so that works now. So let's try and work out what is different. Why is it wrong? So let's work this into it then, shall we? So we'll grab that item.title and replace drop down. You will get the code on the repo if you want to copy this at the end result. But at the moment you should see that it's all exactly the same. Always the same. Area labeled by navbar drop down, and then the ID is navbar drop down. Yeah. What I might do is I might do var drop down item or ID equals 0, and then in the for each I might just increment that plus plus. So what that will do is that will give us a number. So every time we go through these items in our navigation items, it will just increment that number. And then what I think I'll do is where we had that nav bar drop down, I'm just going to do an at like, oh, and then do drop down ID inside there. So that variable that we created I'm putting inside there. So then that means instead of just being navbar drop down every time, it will be navbar drop down 1 or 0 or whatever. So that should hopefully work. So if I put that in there and do the same on the one below it where it's got navbar drop down, there we go. And then the last part is to put the for each around this. And then we'll just bring in, so I'll delete that. I don't need both of those lines. And so we want to make sure that the class is just drop down item, yeah, href. So we want child link URL. We want the target bit adding. I think this is virtually the same as what we had, but the only difference being about that ID. So I think this might work better. Fingers crossed it works. If it doesn't, I don't know. Maybe it should be specific for navbar dropdown. So let's save that and reload the page. Click on that and it's worked. So yeah, it was to do with that ID. And the reason why I've incremented it is so that if we have 2 or more items in the list with an ID, then that ID is going to be different for that. So that when you click on the expander, it will expand the correct one. So yeah, navbar drop down 2, it relates to this here. You see? So yeah, that's worked. So that's given us our drop down menu. It's not styled in the best way, but this isn't about the styling. This is about the Umbraco-ness of it all, for want of a better phrase. So yeah, and as I say, that doesn't become a link that in this bootstrap way of doing it. It just becomes the button to open the menu. So that's why you have blog in there and so on and so on. So I think that concludes this episode. It shows you how to create this navigation menu like this using the nested content now. I hope you like the video. If you do, please click on like and subscribe to the channel. Remember to do bell notifications so you get told when the next video is up. And the code for all of this is on github.com/prjseal/umbraco10 tutorial. On the next episode, I'll show you how to install Usync so that you can have all of this saved in source control, so that if you want to pull down my code repository, or your own even, you'll be able to start the site and install all of the document types and everything to get to the starting point for each episode if you really wanted to. So you could go to the tags, you could download for that episode 7, and then from then on all of them you'll have all the document types and everything ready to carry on from this point. So that's pretty cool. And if you did want to, you can buy me a coffee if you go to codeshare.co.uk. It's very much appreciated, but it's not expected at all. All of this is done for free for everybody anyway. Yeah, thanks a lot. See you on the next episode.